Hey everyone, and a huge welcome to all the middle schoolers joining us today for this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here, because today we're going to unpack one of the most fascinating things happening all around us every single day. We're going to trace step by step exactly how energy travels through nature, from the bright sunshine outside your window right now to the wild animals roaming the forests. Energy is constantly on the move, and today we're going to figure out exactly how that journey works. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, what are food chains? Then we'll meet the members of the ecosystem, see how chains turn into webs, and look at the 10% rule. After that, we'll explain ecological pyramids, and finally, wrap up with why nature absolutely needs balance.
All right, Section 1. What are food chains? So if we want to understand how the natural world actually works, we kind of have to start with the absolute basics of survival, right? Everything needs energy to live. So a food chain, it's basically a sequence of living things where each one is eaten by the next. It literally just shows who eats whom in nature. I'll say that again because it's super important to remember. It shows who eats whom. It's just a straight line showing how energy gets passed from one living thing to another.
Let's picture a real-world example. Imagine a bright, sunny day. The sun is our ultimate energy source, right? Its light beams down, and that energy gets captured by the green grass. Then, hop, 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 along comes a rabbit, munches on the grass, and takes in that energy. Next thing you know, a hungry wolf comes along and eats the rabbit. So it goes sun to grass to rabbit to wolf. Boom! That is a perfect, simple food chain.
And you know, this whole concept isn't just for the forest. Every habitat has its own version. In a pond, it might go from algae to a little fish to a bigger fish like a pike. In a meadow, maybe a flower gets eaten by a butterfly, then a frog snaps up the butterfly, and a heron swoops in for the frog. Or out in the vast ocean, you've got tiny phytoplankton, eaten by krill, eaten by fish, and eventually eaten by a shark. Every single habitat on Earth has these unique parallel chains going on.
Moving on to Section 2. Members of the ecosystem.
Now, every plant and animal plays a super specific role in this biological hierarchy. We've basically got two main groups. On one side, we have producers. Scientists call them autotrophs. Autotrophs. These guys are amazing because they actually make their own food using sunlight. Think plants and algae. They are the starting line. On the flip side, we have consumers. The science word here is heterotrophs. Heterotrophs. They can't make their own food, so they have to eat plants or other animals to survive. Rabbits, wolves, and foxes, all heterotrophs. And within that consumer group, we've got some specialists. Herbivores, or primary consumers, they strictly eat plants. Think of a deer or a caterpillar. Then you've got carnivores. These are your secondary and tertiary consumers that eat other animals, like an owl or a hawk. But hey, we absolutely cannot forget the decomposers, the ditchivores. These guys are like nature's ultimate cleanup crew. When things die, fungi, bacteria, and earthworms break them down. They recycle everything, putting essential nutrients right back into the dirt so the producers can start the whole cycle all over again. It's brilliant, really.
All right, Section 3. From chains to webs. So far, we've been talking in straight lines, but let's be real. Nature isn't just a straight line, is it? Think about this for a second. What happens when an animal eats more than one kind of food? Take a fox. A fox isn't just eating one specific thing every single day. It might catch a mouse on Monday and then a frog on Tuesday. So how exactly do we draw that?
Well, when animals have diverse diets, those simple straight food chains start to connect and cross over each other. It gets tangled. A grasshopper eats plants, sure, but that grasshopper might get eaten by a frog or a bird or a mouse. And that mouse, it could be dinner for a snake, a fox, or an owl. This whole messy, interconnected map of who eats whom, that is what we call a food web. It's way more realistic when you're looking at how nature actually operates.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 10% rule. Okay, time for a tiny bit of nature math. We need to look at how energy actually shrinks as it moves around. 10%, that is the magic number. When energy moves from one level of the food chain up to the next, only about 10% is passed on. No way, right? You're probably thinking, where does the rest of it go? Well, the other 90% gets used up by the animal just living its life, running, growing, hunting, or it just escapes his heat. Let's break this down step by step so you can really see it. Imagine a patch of plants starts with 1,000 units of energy. When a grasshopper eats those plants, it only gets 10% of that, so 100 units. Then a frog eats the grasshopper, it only gets 10% of that, just 10 units. A snake eats the frog, now we're down to one single unit. And finally, A hawk swoops down and eats the snake, and it receives a tiny, barely there 0.1 units of that original plant energy. By the time we hit the top of the chain, the available energy has literally plummeted.
All right, Section 5, Ecological Pyramids Explained.
So, to help us actually picture that massive drop in energy we just talked about, scientists use shapes, specifically pyramids. There are three main ways we measure these levels: the pyramid of energy, the pyramid of numbers, and the pyramid of biomass, which is just the total physical mass of all those organisms. And because of that 10% rule, all three of these measurements naturally stack up into a pyramid shape, super wide at the bottom and really narrow at the top.
Here's why that structure is so absolutely crucial. The base of the pyramid is always the producers, the plants. They have the most energy and there are way more of them. The middle level is the herbivores, fewer of them than plants. And the top, the carnivores. They are the absolute fewest in number. Why? Because a huge predator at the very top needs a massive amount of plants and herbivores beneath it just to scrounge up enough energy to survive. That's exactly why you see thousands of blades of grass for every single hawk.
And our final stop, Section 6, Why Nature Needs Balance.
Now that we've mapped out this whole hierarchy of biological organization, we have to look at the big picture here. Food chains and webs are incredibly important because they do the heavy lifting of maintaining balance in nature. They transfer energy from the sun to literally all living things. They recycle nutrients, and they connect every single organism into one giant, breathing ecosystem. Because everything is so tightly linked, if just one single part of a food chain disappears, it can send shockwaves through all the other organisms.
Before we wrap up, a couple of wild facts for you. Because of all that energy loss we just went over, food chains usually only max out at about 3 to 5 links. There literally just isn't enough energy to keep going. Plus, like we saw with the food web, those top predators are always rare, and a ton of animals actually belong to several different food chains all at the exact same time.
And that brings me to this last absolutely key point. Humans are also a part of food webs. We aren't just watching from the sidelines, we are right in the thick of this biological hierarchy too. So I want to leave you with this to chew on. Knowing that every single choice affects the whole entire web, how do your daily choices and the food you choose to eat impact the delicate balance of our planet's ecosystem? Thanks so much for hanging out and learning with me today, and keep exploring.